Hello, welcome to the Archetypes channel. On this channel, we will talk about archetypes, myths, dreams, the unconscious, and tarot, and how all of this directly affects you. This is the first video in a series about archetypes. Archetypes are the essence of this channel, of this work of ours that begins today. Getting to know the archetypes and understanding how they interact with you, how you express the archetypes, what influence they have on your life, this is something fundamental. You've probably heard about archetypes before. Archetypes are primordial ideas, that is, ideas that were born before things became manifest. They are exemplary models, quintessential ideals representing the pinnacle of something significant. So let's bring this into practice. For example, when you are preparing to construct a brand new house, that house definitely needs to have a detailed blueprint. A project, and this project and blueprint are born from the architect's idea. He captures this idea and puts it on paper, which is a plan, a blueprint, and a model. It is the essential form from which the house will emerge. Everything in the universe behaves this way. Everything has an idea before it manifests. Anything in the universe. The first person to talk about archetypes originally was way back in 400 BC, the Greek philosopher Plato. Plato thought in the following way: our manifest world, our material world, is just a reflection of the world of ideas. This world of ideas is a world that houses the archetypes. This world of ideas is not material, it is non-physical, not material. And because of that, we can say it is transcendent, it transcends matter. Whereas the world of matter that we live in here is an immanent world. So there is the transcendent, which is beyond, and the immanent, which is here manifested. Another way you might hear about archetypes is as the unmanifested world and the manifested world. The concept of implicate order and the notion of explicate order. So, ever since the very dawn of human existence, people have naturally begun to develop specific, complex patterns of behavior. For example, you can clearly see in very ancient tribes from over 10,000 years ago certain recurring behaviors, certain social rituals, religious manifestations, tales, stories, artistic expressions. And if you notice, in various parts of the world where there was no connection at all between these tribes, these civilizations, the manifestations were the same. So that's where the idea of archetypes comes in. Archetypes, if you look at the word archetype, it comes from arche, meaning ancient, initial, primordial. Just like in archaeology, which is the study of the ancient, of what comes from way back, from the ancestral, and the word type, which means a mold. So an archetype is an ancestral mold of a very ancient idea. The older an archetype is, the more powerful it becomes. It's very important that we develop an idea here with you. Archetypes are not things to be used. We can interact with archetypes, extract from them the energy and information they convey to us, because each archetype has its own energy and its own information. When you interact with an archetype, you are receiving its energy and information. What kind of information is that? It's information that forms something, that creates in matter. We, as physical material beings existing here, simply cannot interact directly with these pure archetypes. Imagine, if you will, that we are positioned here on a vast ladder within a complex hierarchy. We reside down here in the manifested world, while the eternal archetypes remain far up here above us. These entities exist and manifest far below the all, the intelligent all, the supreme all that originally brought forth and created every single thing that exists, the all that is infinite and pure energy, pure consciousness, manifests itself below its own essence through complex streams of energy and structured information. So archetypes can be considered as the first ideas, the first forms from which everything comes. Look at how important this is. So understanding archetypes is fundamental for you to do well here on your journey. Archetypes have a wide variety of uses. In this video, we are still going to discuss how you can perceive archetypes and how you can interact with them. What is their importance? Their importance in your life. But I want to explain what an archetype is not. An archetype is not a tool that you use for your own personal interests. It is very important when we interact with archetypes that we have an attitude of reverence because they are far above us. Interacting directly with archetypes is impossible because their energy is so great that it would fry us if we had direct contact. It is something that exists deep within the human mind, in the collective unconscious, as Jung used to say, and you cannot act on it directly. But the archetype manifests itself through various situations in our lives. The first is through myths. So, when you talk about the ancient myth of Athena, coming from the land of Greece, the famous Greek goddess Athena, who is widely known as the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, you are witnessing the powerful manifestation of the universal archetype, the wise one, which is beautifully manifested in a myth and embodied within a goddess. When you interact with this energy, you receive inspiration from this archetype of the wise one. You can manifest wisdom in your life. If you are born under the influence of this archetype, your life will be guided by wisdom, by the desire to know, the desire to be wise, to instruct others, and you have the gift of oratory, of explaining things. And there's not much point in trying to run away from this path because the archetype lets you play around a bit. It gives you your free will to make your own choices, but you'll feel the invisible hand of the archetype that rules you, constantly putting you back on track. And what happens if you don't follow these instructions, these inspirations? From the archetype that rules you, you end up having problems. When we say that we have free will, when we say that we have the power to choose, we're talking about this power to choose, to follow the archetype or not. That is our free will. It starts here and ends here. Either I follow it and have a satisfying life, a life of fulfillment, of achievement, of happiness, or I don't follow it and I'll have problems. So archetypes manifest themselves in myths, in the stories that people tell from way back since the beginning of humanity. In fairy tales, we see the archetypes, these patterns that end up being imprinted in fairy tales. And this is very important. When you pass this on to children, you are transmitting the strength of the archetypes through a fairy tale. This already starts to imprint on the child from an early age. This idea of the archetype, which for us, with our understanding and our five senses, is very difficult for us to grasp. So we have to use certain things to explain archetypes. So consider the classic fairy tales, heroic stories, ancient myths, and various religious manifestations. Within your own dreams, you often see these universal archetypes. They communicate directly with you. Consequently, you will frequently have complex dreams that do not merely express what is hidden in your personal unconscious, but rather reflect something much deeper and more profound within the collective human experience. You may already know that within our complex psychic world and deep inside our private inner world, we actually possess several distinct and intricate layers of consciousness. So we have an inner world and we interact with the outer world. Our complex inner world has a conscious part where we can discover the central ego and identity. We will see the masks that we wear for other people, which we call personas. And we have, below the level of consciousness, below this level at which we interact with the world, with the physical world, with the external world, with other people, thank you. Below that, we have our unconscious, which is where we store what we don't want to experience, what has traumatized us, what we are ashamed of, our prejudices. They are all thrown into our unconscious. There, in the unconscious, as Jung used to say, we have complexes, we have shadows, which are those things we sweep under the rug, the things we don't want to experience. It's not just negative aspects, there are also positive aspects, certain talents, certain potentialities that we could live out, but we don't want to, so we push them under the rug. And in the personal unconscious, lying deep beneath its surface, there is the collective unconscious, which is the vast accumulated reservoir of every experience that the whole of humankind has ever experienced, is currently undergoing, and will eventually encounter in the future. It is in the collective unconscious that the archetypes reside. So it is so deep because we, with our consciousness, already have difficulty accessing our personal unconscious, the things we have left behind, that we repressed, that we sublimated, that we put away so well, hidden away. We already have trouble accessing that. Imagine trying to access a world as deep and vast as the world of archetypes. But archetypes communicate with our unconscious and also with our conscious mind through what? Through symbols. So the symbol is something that expresses what the archetype wants to convey. A symbol is not just a simple sign, like a stop sign. A stop sign, everyone sees it and understands that the concept is for you to stop. But that doesn't have any emotion. It doesn't have any meaning. But symbols, on the other hand, are loaded with meaning. They bring us emotions. They stir our limbic system, which is our emotional system. So archetypes, through symbols, evoke emotions in us. And these emotions can be used by other people, by marketing, so that we buy something, so that we behave in a certain way, because the power a symbol has is very intense. And the symbol, it's not something closed off. We're not going to explain, for example, here is a tiger. A tiger is an animal, but it's also a symbol. Depending on whether you live in India, you will understand the symbol of the tiger in a certain way. It powerfully expresses inner strength, unique individuality, and independence, intelligence. But for someone who lives in a dangerous region where wild tigers frequently attack humans, that powerful symbol will be heavily loaded with intense personal experience and with everything that you have personally gone through in your life. So a symbol is never the same for everyone. Although there are dictionaries of symbols, they try to express and can only scratch the surface of what a symbol is. But we need, with our mind, with our intellect, with just our 5 senses, to understand in order to interact with them. So symbols, if you understand symbols, you'll know what people are trying to convey to you. So let's go back. A symbol, they have their own meaning, but it's not fixed. You can look at a symbol and it will tell you what it means in your inner world. So it is loaded with meaning, not only its own intrinsic meaning, but also with what you have inside yourself. One way you see symbols is in shapes. So if you see the shape of a tiger, if you see the shape of another important animal that brings us a lot of energy, a lot of power, like the eagle, are you seeing a symbol? And these symbols are charged with energy and information. Therefore, they will interact with your energy. If you stay in the same environment where there is a symbol, a symbolic animal here, you will be receiving the information from this symbol all the time. And this symbol, since it has its own information, its characteristics, its qualities, this will reach you. And the things you will receive will be absorbed by your unconscious. Symbols speak to our unconscious. And if you start paying attention to this, they will also speak to your conscious mind. In other words, here, where we think, where we intellectualize, perceive the world, and shape the world, we will start to notice the action of these symbols that arise from our unconscious. Look how interesting all of this is. So an archetype is much more than just, oh, I'm going to use the image of a tiger, I'm going to use an eagle as a logo. To give myself power, I'm going to use a dolphin to bring me joy. This goes far beyond that. That's one of the ways humans try to make use of archetypes, but I repeat, archetypes are not things to be used. You can interact with them. On the contrary, archetypes use you. In a good way, they express themselves through you. So you are a channel, a vehicle for the expression of an intense force, of an enormous psychic energy that creates everything that exists in the world. So we must begin to interact with them with great reverence. It's not just a little game. You might try to use an archetype, and if you do it in the wrong way, you could get a result completely different from what you imagined. So this channel will bring to you all the manifestations of archetypes that mankind knows. We are going to talk here about other manifestations beyond dreams, beyond forms, animals. We will talk about myths, about the gods of each civilization. If you take Athena, I've already talked about her here. Athena, who is the Greek goddess of wisdom, you will find the same goddess with another name in Roman civilization, Minerva. So, in different civilizations, in various periods of human history, this archetypal force of wisdom manifested itself through goddesses or gods. And they continue manifesting in the modern world. We ourselves can manifest this archetype, these symbols that the archetype brings us. We can manifest wisdom. So archetypes manifest in many ways, and it would take a whole lifetime to explain them. We are going to try to summarize here, to leave something simple for you to understand and practical, because it's no use for the world of archetypes to remain unknown to most people, or only known in the academic world. So the Jungian school knows archetypes very well, because Jung brought this idea of archetypes, which he went to study back in Plato's works. And he developed the idea of the collective unconscious, which is the unconscious part of humanity, where everything is stored, all human experiences are there. And he brought this idea of archetypes well defined and the influence that archetypes have on your psyche, on your mind. So archetypes, when well studied through dreams, through psychoanalysis, when they are well studied through your behavior, through the manifestations in your life, you can use this archetypal force to balance your mind, to individuate yourself, as Jung used to say. What does it mean to individuate? It's when you move away from the path of the ego, that psychic force that believes you are it. So the ego is pure identification. This part of us, the ego, is not our real self. The ego is the way we communicate with others, with the world. The ego is the way we see ourselves. So the ego starts to form early in childhood, and then what would be natural? For this ego to mature, to become strong, and then to start to serve the interests of something greater, something eternal, something much wiser than itself. The ego, identified with your name, your profession, your life story. So the ego is that structure that is living here, that identifies with various things, that gets attached, that wants to have control. But our real essence, or we can also call it the divine spark, our real essence, it is not temporary like the ego. It is not identified with I am this, I am that. No, our essence, our divine spark carries something much wiser, much more complete, whole. This then is our true essence, our identity, our true self. We are pure spiritual essence, and we in our truest essence are actively undergoing a profound human experience right now and here. In this current physical existence, we are continuously developing a complex ego. But this ego frequently obstructs our path and complicates our journey in many different aspects. Our negativities, our fears, our traumas, our difficulties in relationships, in progressing in life, in evolving, in prospering. The ego is always involved in this, in our difficulties. Besides the ego, which is in our conscious mind, there is also our shadow, which is in the unconscious. But it also has enormous psychic power. The shadow is what we don't want to experience, what we are ashamed of. It's what we deny in ourselves but see in others. So when you see something in someone else that really irritates you, that unsettles you, you can be sure that you are projecting onto the other person this very quality that you have and that we all have, but that you don't accept. So you sweep it under the rug, you don't see it in yourself, but you see it in the other, and then you react, you go against the other person. So this is one way when you know the art, archetype, shadow, what the ego is, when you know your psyche. We should all know our psyche, because our psyche is our soul. It's what makes us alive, what makes us human beings. When you know your soul, you are able to move through life, to navigate in the best possible way. The archetypes, in addition to manifesting themselves within our vivid dreams and physical forms, they also manifest in distinctive smells, in various tastes, rich flavors on your palate, and within your intricate sense of physical touch. So our 5 primary senses, they are fully able to identify this subtle energy. They deeply imprint our inner consciousness with these profound sensations. Our 5 senses, we can perceive them through the 5 senses. Why is that? Because that's what we have to navigate here in this world, material. But we also have another sense, which is often underdeveloped, and that is intuition. Jung spoke a lot about intuition. The 4 attributes of personality would be perception, perceiving things with the 5 senses, thought, feeling, and intuition. So when you have the 4 attributes of personality well balanced, you are a very complete being. Although each of us tends to have one of these 4 attributes stronger, there are people who are more perceptive, more sensory. Some people are more about thinking, others are more about feeling, and others are more intuitive. But the fact that we have a predominance of one of these 4 attributes doesn't mean we don't have the others. And what's most interesting is that we can develop them. A very intuitive person can make use of their physical perception, their feelings, and their thinking. They can and should develop them. So we have various ways in which we can present ourselves. One of them is these aspects of our personality, being more sensitive, more thoughtful, more sentimental, or more intuitive. there are other ways of putting yourself into forms, into boxes, and archetypes are one of them. Archetypes, as I mentioned at the beginning, are forms. So a conscious soul intentionally chooses to be in this physical form, in this complex and beautiful earthly existence. We do this. This isn't talked about much in the academic world, so here we are already advancing a little further in the concept of the archetype. The archetype in reality is a path, a program that our soul will use to interact here in this physical experience. Here it's like a theater, we choose roles to play. And it's very interesting that we do, as the great actors do, play that role completely to the fullest, with all its strength, embracing both its positive and negative characteristics. And here I say that the idea of positive and negative characteristics of an archetype is something of the human mind. An archetype simply is. It may be that it has some characteristics that we, with our limited understanding, identify as negative.